Hello, this is Marta with Classes for Teens. I'm here for another pre-algebra review. This is number 6, and today we'll be talking about decimals and fractions. Before we get started, I want to look in a textbook and review place values. All right, here is the book. Let's see if we can get this focused. Okay, so when you have the numbers before the decimal, you count the places, the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and millions. After the decimals, we have fractional parts, and we're writing them in a decimal form. And this tells you how many tenths you have, how many tenths of a whole, how many hundredths, thousandths, and 10,000ths. And the places keep going decreasingly by powers of 10 and increasing by powers of 10 to the left, okay? So the part over here is the whole number part. That is your decimal point. And this is the fractional decimal part. I just wanted to remind you of these words. And you may want to read about that again if you've forgotten, okay? So let's go ahead and do today's worksheet review. All right. So, it says to write the decimal as a fraction. So in order to do that, we really have to think about what we just reviewed. This is telling us we have tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So in this particular problem, we have thousandths is the last place after the decimal. And how many of those do we have? Well, we have 208. Do not write it in lowest terms, so we want to stop. Now, this one's a little trickier. They want it as a fraction and not in lowest terms. So this part right here we know is going to be 7 tenths, right? But what about that? Well, each of those is a whole. So we have 7 wholes. And if we cut those into pieces of 10, right, like 7 whole pizzas, each cut into 10 parts, that would give us 70 tenths. So this part there, the 7, is the same as 70 tenths, and this is 7 tenths. So that means this is the same as 77 tenths. And that is our answer in fraction form. All right. Now we're going to look at decimals and remember about what we learned about place value. They're asking us to add and subtract without using a calculator. Now it helps me to line these up, so I'm going to rewrite my problems vertically. 9.960 is the first part, and I'm to add to that a 5. Line the decimals up together, 0.092. All right, so we add vertically, and I usually start on the right side. We get a 2, that's 15, carry your 1. 9 and 1 is 10, carry your 1. 9 and 1 is 10, and 5 is 15. So we're going to get 15.052. So that would be 15 and 52 thousandths if we read it, okay? I'll box off my answers. That's always a good habit to get into. Okay, let's do the next one, which is a subtraction. Writing it vertically, 15.460 minus 11.907. Okay. Now we can't subtract 7 from 0. So I need to trade one of these to make 10 right here, right? So that knocks that down by 1. When I make that exchange, 10 minus 7 is 3. 5 minus 0 is 0. 9 is too large to take from 4, so I'm going to trade out one of these for 10 of those plus the 4 that are there, right? So I'm going to make that a 14. 14 minus 9 is 5. And then this was knocked down to a 4. So I have 4 minus 1 is 3. And 1 minus 1 is 0. Did I make a mistake there? Yes. 5 minus 0. This should be a 5. I'm going to take a red pen and correct that. 5 minus 0 is 5. I'm not sure what I did there, but I apologize for any confusion. So, looks good. Let's move to the top of the next column. These want us to multiply or divide as indicated without using a calculator. Make sure that your answer is reasonable by estimating it first. So I have 8.2, that's a little more than 8, and I'm multiplying it by 1.7, which is not quite 2. So this is going to be close to 8 times 2, right? Which is going to be, our answer should be around 16, right? We already know that. So to work this out by hand, and again, I encourage you in the 21st century to check your calculator on your answers, but we're going to take an 8.2 and multiply it by a 1.7. I can't even tell you how long it's been since I've multiplied like this, a million years ago. Okay, so we take the 7 times 2 is 14. Carry your 1. 8 times 7 is 56, and 1 is 57. Okay, now I'm going to go to this 1 and multiply it by each of those. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 8 is 8. Hope we get this right? We get a 4. 7 and 2 is 9. 5 and 8 is 13. And something looks a little amiss, but maybe not. We get 13.94. Now, we had 2 places behind the decimal, so our answer has to have 2 places behind the decimal. So I moved over 2 and put my decimal. Now, I'm kind of wondering, because I think we said 8 times 2 is 16. That's a little too big because we rounded that up a good bit. If we did 8 times 1, we would have gotten 8. So the answer would be somewhere between 8 when we round that down and 16 when we round it up. And it's around the middle of that because it's 0.7, which is about halfway between 1 and 2. So the answer surprised me a little. I thought we were going to have a little bit larger, but I didn't think very hard about it, okay? So that is correct. We have that right, and you can always check it on your calculator. Most of your teachers aren't going to have you multiplying by hand anymore, but now we're going to do division. And we're going to take 48.9 and divide it by 5 without using our calculator. 5 will not divide into 4, okay? 5 will divide into 48. So 9 times 5 is 45. Subtract that. And I'm not going to worry with my decimal yet. I'm going to put it up here, right? Because it's getting ready to stick in. I did the 48 first. So 39. How many 5s go into 39? Well, 8 times 5 is 40, so that's too much. 7 times 5 is 35. Oops, that was a minus. And we have 4 left over. So we have to keep going because it's a decimal. We're not doing fractions. And so in order to do that, I need to bring down a 0. I think I'll change to a different color for that. I'm going to have to add a 0 there and bring down a 0 and see how many 5s will go into 40. And that would be 8. 8 times 5 is 40. And now I subtract and my remainder is 0, so I'm done. You have to keep subtracting with decimal division until you get a 0, or you get a repeating pattern, or you get ever how much they said you had to round to. So our answer is going to be 9.78 for this division question. And again, check it with your calculator. All right, let's move on to the next one. Change the fraction to the decimal. They didn't tell us we can't use our calculator, so we're going to round it as indicated. Okay, so the 10,000ths. So we're going to have the tens. the hundreds, the thousands, and the 10,000s. So we're going to need 4 decimal places. So when we're doing our answer, it's going to have 4 places after the decimal on this one. So that means this number after that's going to tell us whether we round this up or down. Okay, so let's take our calculator and do 12 divided by 17 and decide how to round it. I'm using the TI-36 X Pro. 12 divided by 17 is 0.708, I'm sorry, 70588. So the last place we're going to keep is that 8 right there, and it's decided whether we round up or down by the 8 behind it. The 8 behind it is more than 5, so it rounds that 8 up to a 9. So we're going to have 0.7059. 0.7059. And it's kind of customary to put a 0 in front of this, so let's just do that. I don't think it's really wrong, but it's customary. Okay, now we're going to do this to the nearest tenths. So I think about my place value. Tenths is the first place, right? So I just want to go to the first place right there. So that means this, after it's going to decide me whether I round up or down. So I'm going to take 4 divided by 3, 4 divided by 3, and I get 1.3 repeating. And the 3 in the hundredths place isn't enough to round that up. So I'm going to just leave it as a 1.3. Rounding is especially important if you're interested in going into science. You need to understand significant figures and rounding. So this is good practice. Even if you're not, right? Things get rounded all the time. Now they want this to 2 decimal places. When it means 2 decimal places, it means after the decimal, they want 2 spots. So we're going to use the 3rd spot to decide what to put in the 2nd spot. So we're going to take 1 and 15/29. Let's see if our calculator will do this. I think it will with this over the fraction button. So, or you might make it into an improper fraction if you didn't know how to do it on your calculator. I'm going to do the second option of the 7, which is 1 and arrow over. Put 15 in the numerator, arrow down, put 29ths in the denominator, hit enter. Well, it's a fraction. The button above the enter on this calculator is the one that's going to convert it to decimal, so it's 1.51724 blob. Okay, so do that on your calculator, or you can work it out a long way, right? And so we're going to look at the 3rd place to decide what to put in the 2nd. So we're going to have a 1.5. And this is a 1 followed by a 7, so the 7 rounds that up to a 1.52. Good. Now the last one says to write the fraction as a decimal using the bar notation. Now we haven't really talked about the bar notation. Back here when we had repeating 3s, we could have written that if we wanted to represent all the decimals. It was a 1, if you do it again on your calculator, 4 divided by 3. Here, I'll just do it for you in case you forgot. Here we go. 4 divided by 3 is 1.333. It repeats forever. That's what we called a rational number because it's repeating and non-terminating, but does repeat. Therefore, it can be written as a ratio, and that's what they're asking us to do down on the other ones, I guess. So here we have 1.3. In order not to write 3's forever, we can use this symbol, which is a bar, and that symbol means repeating. So that's what they're asking us to do down here. Take 2/3 and write it as a decimal with the bar, with the repeating part. So whatever repeats, we need to put a bar over. 2 divided by 3 is 0.666. Now notice what happens at the end of your calculator. Don't be disturbed. Your calculator can only calculate so far. Otherwise, you couldn't read the display if it just kept going forever, right? So it rounds the last place up. But this is really a repeating 6 all the way to the end. So we're going to write this as 0.6 repeating. Okay, that's all we have to do. All right, I will see you for the next review. Remember to look below for the lecture notes and look below for homework link to do some extra practice problems because you learn math by doing it, not by watching it, and the answers will be included in the practice problems. Thank you.